Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The morning of day one, I arrived at TechStart Academy wearing my most serious blazer and clutch purse, looking like I was about to deliver a keynote at a medical conference rather than learn JavaScript. The classroom buzzed with 20-something, energy hoodies, sneakers, and the kind of optimism I'd lost somewhere between my residency and my marriage. I found a seat in the front row, pulled out my color-coded notebook system, and waited for our instructor, Marcus, to begin the partner assignments. This was it, my fresh start, my chance to reinvent myself as someone who understood algorithms instead of arteries. Rachel Morrison, Marcus called out, consulting his tablet. Your partner for the next 12 weeks will be ... I sat up straighter, pen poised. Avery Chen. The name floated across the room, and I turned to see a hand wave from the back corner. A young woman with purple-streaked black hair, wearing what appeared to be pajama pants covered in constellation patterns and at least 7 silver rings, was gathering an impressive collection of crystals from her desk. It cannot be serious. I watched in mounting horror as she approached my pristine workstation like a walking metaphysical shop explosion. She had canvas sneakers covered in hand-drawn symbols, a messenger bag that jingled with every step, and the kind of effortless confidence that made me want to check my own appearance and my phone's camera. "Hi there," she said, dropping into the seat beside me with a grin that was entirely too bright for 8 a.m. "I'm Avery, fair warning, I burn incense while I code. I talk to my computer when it's being stubborn, and I'm pretty sure Mercury is in retrograde, which means we should probably back up everything twice." I stared at her. This child who looked like she'd gotten dressed in a head shop, was going to be my coding partner for the next 3 months. The same 3 months I was counting on to completely transform my life. "I'm Rachel," I managed. I've never worked with crystals." "Oh, these aren't for the code," she laughed, arranging what appeared to be an amethyst cluster next to my notebook. "Well, not directly, but rose quartz helps with creative flow, and this little guy," she held up a small dark stone, "is black. Tourmaline, protection against negative energy. Trust me, you'll need it when we hit the JavaScript modules." I wanted to argue. I wanted to request a partner change. I wanted to explain that I was a woman of science, that I'd spent the last decade of my life in sterile hospital environments, where everything had a logical explanation and crystals were just expensive rocks. Instead, I heard myself saying, "What makes you think you can debug faster than me?" Her grin widened. "Want to bet?" And that's how my carefully planned fresh start turned into a competition with a fortune-telling programmer who smelled like sandalwood and looked at me like she could see straight through my professional facade. The first few weeks were torture. Avery's incense made me sneeze, her habit of humming while coding broke my concentration, and her intuitive approach to problem-solving went against everything I'd learned about methodical, evidence-based thinking. She'd stare at an error message for 30 seconds, mumble something about what the code wants to tell us, and then somehow dash fix bugs that had been stumping me for hours. "How do you do that?" I asked one evening during week 3. We were in the computer lab past midnight, the only light coming from our monitors and the small candle she'd lit on her desk, despite the clearly posted fire safety regulations. "Do what?" She didn't look up from her screen, her fingers flying over the keyboard in a rhythm that seemed almost musical. "Solve problems without actually ... solving them. You don't follow any logical troubleshooting process. You just feel my way through it." She finally turned to look at me, and I noticed for the first time how the candlelight caught the gold flecks in her dark eyes. Sometimes the logical path isn't the right path. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. I'm a surgeon, I said, perhaps more sharply than I intended. If I trusted my instincts over evidence-based protocols, people would die. But you're not in an operating room anymore. Her voice was gentler now. You're learning something completely new. Maybe it's okay to trust a different part of yourself. I wanted to argue with her, but something about the way she said it, like she understood exactly why I was here, what I was running from, made the fight drain out of me. Instead, I found myself watching the way her lips moved when she concentrated. The small crease that appeared between her eyebrows when she encountered a particularly stubborn bug. It was during week 4 that I started noticing other things. How her predictions about which assignments would be most challenging always seemed accurate. How she somehow knew exactly when I needed coffee before I realized it myself. How her presence had begun to feel less like chaos and more like possibility. Your ex-husband did a number on you, didn't he? She said one night so quietly I almost missed it. I'd been staring at my laptop screen, but my mind was elsewhere, specifically on the text message I'd received from Brad earlier that evening. Another attempt to talk things through, another manipulation disguised as concern. I deleted it without responding, but it had thrown off my entire evening. I don't know what you mean, I lied. Rachel? She turned her chair to face me fully. I may read tarot cards and believe in cosmic energy, but I also have eyes. You flinch every time your phone buzzes. You work twice as hard as everyone else because you're trying to prove something to someone who isn't even here. And sometimes, when you think no one is looking, you get this expression like you're surprised you still exist. The accuracy of her observation hit me like a physical blow. I felt exposed, seen in a way that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. He used to tell me I was too much, I heard myself saying. Too intense, too focused on work, too everything. Then I'd find out he was cheating again, and he'd say it was because I wasn't enough. Not attentive enough, not feminine enough, not whatever he needed me to be that week. Avery was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the space between our desks and gently touched the pale strip of skin where my wedding ring used to be. He was wrong, she said simply. You're not too much or too little. You're exactly right. Something shifted in that moment. Some carefully constructed wall I've been maintaining started to crack. Because this strange mystical girl with her crystals in her incense and her impossible ability to debug code was looking at me like I was something precious. Like I was worth protecting. That evening, I invited Avery back to my apartment for the first time. It wasn't planned. We'd been working on our final project proposal at the academy, and when they announced the building was closing for maintenance, she shrugged and said, my place is 20 minutes away, but if you've got a coffee maker and W, I -phi ... My apartment was a study in beige minimalism, the kind of space that looked like it belonged in a furniture catalog rather than housing an actual human being. Brad had insisted on hiring a decorator when we were married, and I'd never bothered to change anything after he left. Looking at it through Avery's eyes-taking in the generic artwork, the perfectly arranged throw pillows, the complete absence of personality, I felt embarrassed. This is very ... She paused, setting her laptop bag down carefully. Clean. You can say sterile. It is sterile. I moved toward the kitchen, grateful for something to do with my hands. Wine? I think I have a bottle of something. Sure. She was examining my bookshelf, which consisted entirely of medical textbooks and a few thrillers Brad had left behind. Rachel? Yeah? Where are your books? Your pictures? Your ... stuff? I paused in my search through the wine cabinet. This is my stuff. No, she said gently. This is someone else's idea of your stuff. This is what someone thought you should want. She was right, of course. Everything in this apartment had been chosen by Brad or the decorator or some version of myself that had been trying so hard to be the right kind of wife that I'd forgotten to be any kind of person. I found a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses, proud that my hands weren't shaking. I'm working on it. The personality thing. That's kind of the whole point of this career change, right? Figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by someone else's expectations. We settled on my couch with our laptops and wine, ostensibly to work on our project proposal. We'd decided to create an app called Heal Hue, a platform that would combine traditional medical data with complementary wellness approaches, using AI to create personalized treatment plans that address both physical symptoms and overall well-being. It was ambitious, probably impossible, and exactly the kind of thing that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. So, Avery said, pulling up our shared document, I was thinking we could use color theory as part of the user interface. Different hues for different types of recommendations: blue for traditional medical, green for nutrition, purple for mindfulness. Practices. That's actually brilliant, I said, leaning closer to look at her screen. Patients respond well to visual cues, and if we can make the interface intuitive rather than clinical. We worked in comfortable synchronization for the next 2 hours, wine loosening the edges of my usual perfectionism. Avery had plugged in her laptop and was cross-legged on my couch like she belonged there, occasionally reaching over to point something out on my screen or steal a sip of my wine. It was close to midnight when she made the observation that changed everything. You know, she said, setting down her wine glass and turning to face me fully, I don't think I've seen you really smile since we started this program. Laugh, yes, but smile. Like actually happy smile. I smile, I protested. You do this thing. She demonstrated a polite, closed-lip expression that looked exactly like my professional smile. Very controlled, very appropriate. But not you. How would you know what my real smile looks like? Because I've been watching you for 6 weeks and I see flashes of it sometimes. When you figure out a particularly tricky piece of code, or when someone in class says something that actually surprises you, your whole face changes. You get these little crinkles around your eyes, and your mouth does this thing where it's not quite symmetrical, and you look like you're letting yourself feel something good. The accuracy of her observation, combined with the wine and the intimacy of my own living room, broke something open inside me. Brad used to say I had an ugly laugh, I heard myself admit. Too loud, inappropriate for social situations. So I learned to moderate myself. Avery's expression darkened. What kind of person tells someone their laugh is ugly? The kind who's probably looking for reasons to justify sleeping with other people. The words came out bitter, surprising me with their honesty. Rachel. She reached over and took my wine glass, setting it on the coffee table along with hers. Look at me. When I met her eyes, she was closer than I'd realized. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her irises, could smell the faint sandalwood scent that always seemed to follow her. He didn't deserve you, she said quietly, her fingers reaching up to trace the pale line where my wedding ring used to be. And I don't just mean the cheating, I mean all of it. Someone who tries to dim your light because it makes them feel small about themselves doesn't deserve to share space with you. Something cracked open in my chest. Years of careful control, of measured responses, of being the right kind of woman for the wrong kind of man. It all just broke. I started crying. Not the controlled, silent tears of my marriage, but ugly, honest sobs that shook my entire body. Years of feeling like I wasn't enough and too much at the same time. Years of shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. Years of wondering if there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made love feel like loss. Avery didn't try to fix it or stop it or tell me it would be okay. She just moved closer and let me cry. against her shoulder, her hand stroking my hair while she whispered things I couldn't quite hear, but somehow understood. When the crying finally subsided, I found myself exactly where I was supposed to be, in the arms of someone who saw all my jagged edges and held them gently instead of trying to smooth them away. "Better?" she asked softly. I lifted my head to look at her, suddenly aware of how close we were, how her hand was still tangled in my hair, how her lips were just inches from mine. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "Do what?" "Feel this way about someone who actually sees me." Her smile was soft and real and directed entirely at me. "Lucky for you, I'm excellent at figuring things out as I go." When she kissed me, it was nothing like the careful, controlled kisses of my marriage. This was urgent and honest and tasted like wine and possibilities. This was what it felt like to be wanted for exactly who I was, not who I might become if I changed enough of myself. We made love on my generic beige couch, then again in my carefully neutral bedroom, and each time felt like waking up from a very long sleep. Her hands mapped territory that Brad had claimed, but never really explored, finding places that made me gasp and arch and remember what it felt like to live fully in my own body. Afterward, we lay tangled in my expensive impersonal sheets, her fingers tracing patterns on my skin while I tried to process what had just happened. "Avery, when you told Brad you were mine, did you mean it?" She propped herself up on one elbow to look at me, her hair falling across her face like a dark curtain. "I meant it like to be. If you want me." "I want you," I said, surprised by how easily the truth came out. "I want this. Whatever this is." "This," she said, leaning down to press a soft kiss to my collarbone, "is the beginning of everything." The next morning brought reality in the form of my phone buzzing with messages. 3 from my mother, 2 from my former colleague, Dr. Sarah Chun, no relation to Avery, and 1 from my divorce attorney about finalizing some paperwork. I was in the kitchen making coffee, wearing one of Avery's constellation print t-shirts and feeling more like myself than I had in years, when I heard her talking to someone on the phone in my living room. "I know what you said, Zelda, but this is different." Her voice carried a tension I'd never heard before. "She's not like the others. This isn't some rebound thing." Others? I found myself hovering in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, eavesdropping on a conversation I clearly wasn't meant to hear. "Because I can feel it," Avery continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The connection, it's real. It's what you warned me about, isn't it? The kind that rewrites everything." She was quiet for a long moment, presumably listening. "To whoever Zelda was, I don't care about the risks. Yes, I know what happened to Maya. Yes, I know mixing business with pleasure broke her gifts entirely. But Rachel isn't just business, and this isn't just pleasure. This is ... double quotes, another pause. Yeah, I think it might be that." She ended the call and turned to find me standing in the doorway, clearly having overheard more than I should have. "Maya?" I asked. Avery sighed, sinking down onto my couch. "My mentor, Madame Zelda's former student. She was incredibly gifted, could read people's energy, predict outcomes with startling accuracy. Then she fell in love with a business partner." "What happened?" "According to Zelda, she lost her objectivity. Started seeing what she wanted to see instead of what was actually there. Their business failed, the relationship ended, and Maya ... She couldn't trust her instincts anymore. Couldn't separate her desires from her insights." I sat down beside her, setting my coffee on the table. "And Zelda thinks the same thing will happen to you? She thinks I'm risking my gifts for something that might not last." Avery looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "She's not wrong about the risk. That she might be wrong about us not lasting? I hope so." She reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers. because I've never felt anything like what I feel when I'm with you, and the thought of losing that or losing you it's terrifying. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah Chen, and I knew I should probably answer. Rachel. Sarah's voice carried the particular brand of concern that came from medical colleagues who were also friends. I heard about the coding boot camp thing. Please tell me this is just a midlife crisis phase and you're not actually planning to leave medicine permanently. I glanced at Avery, who was pretending to focus on her laptop but was obviously listening. It's not a phase, Sarah. I'm building something new. Something that could actually help people in ways that traditional medicine sometimes can't. You mean like alternative healing? Rachel, come on. You're a surgeon, a scientist. You know that stuff is mostly placebo effect and wishful thinking. Actually, I said, my voice getting sharper, I'm learning that maybe there's room for both. Maybe treating the whole person instead of just their symptoms isn't such a crazy idea. This is about Brad, isn't it? I get it, you want to reinvent yourself, prove you don't need him. But throwing away your entire career, your credibility, for what, some app that combines WebMD with horoscopes? The dismissal in her voice hit exactly where it was meant to. Because part of me, the part that had spent years building a reputation in a field that valued evidence, above intuition, wondered if she was right. I have to go, I said, ending the call before Sarah could say anything else that might shake my newfound confidence. Rough conversation? Avery asked gently. Just everyone I used to know telling me I've lost my mind. Have you? I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had somehow become the center of my universe in just a few weeks, who saw possibilities where others saw problems, who made me feel like the person I'd always wanted to be. Probably, I admitted. But I like the person I am when I've lost my mind. She smiled, that real unguarded smile that made my heart do things that definitely weren't covered in medical school. Good, she said, because I'm pretty sure I'm falling in love with her. The final weeks of the boot camp flew by in a blur of code, coffee, and stolen moments between classes. Avery and I had found our rhythm as partners in every sense of the word. We worked seamlessly together on Heel Hugh, spent most evenings at one of our apartments, and had developed the kind of shorthand communication that made other people in our cohort joke about us being that couple. We were that couple, I realized. Despite every rational reason why we shouldn't work, she was 7 years younger, from a completely different world, believed in things I'd been trained to dismiss. We fit together like puzzle pieces I hadn't known were missing. Heel Hugh had evolved into something genuinely groundbreaking. Our app would integrate traditional medical data with complementary wellness approaches, using machine learning to create personalized treatment plans that addressed both physical symptoms and overall well-being. We had incorporated Avery's intuitive understanding of what people needed with my medical knowledge and systematic approach to problem solving. The day before our final presentation, we were in the computer lab doing last-minute testing when Marcus approached our workstation. Chen Morrison, he said, consulting his tablet. I've got good news and potentially complicated news. We looked up from our screens, Avery automatically reaching for my hand under the table, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The good news is that Heel Hugh has been selected as one of the top 3 projects. You'll be presenting to a panel that includes venture capitalists, healthcare executives, and tech industry leaders. This is the real deal. We're talking potential funding in the millions. My heart started racing. This was what we'd been working toward, but the reality of it suddenly felt enormous. What's the potentially complicated news? Avery asked. Marcus hesitated. The panel includes Dr. Bradley Morrison from St. Mary's Hospital's investment board. The coffee I'd been drinking turned to acid in my stomach. Of course, Brad would find a way to insert himself into this moment. That's my ex-husband, I said quietly. Yeah, I figured that might be the case when I saw the name. If you want to withdraw, I understand. There are other opportunities. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. No, we're not withdrawing. This project is too important. Avery squeezed my hand. Are you sure? We could wait for the next pitch competition, find other investors. He doesn't get to take this away from us. I was surprised by the conviction in my own voice. He's already taken too much. That evening, we practiced our presentation until we could deliver it in our sleep. Avery had suggested incorporating some of her more intuitive insights about user experience while I focused on the medical accuracy and evidence-based aspects of our approach. You know what I love about this? Avery said as we finally closed our laptops around midnight. What? We're not just building an app. We're building a bridge between your world and mine, between different ways of understanding health and healing. She was right. Heal wasn't just a product, it was a philosophy. It was proof that seemingly opposite approaches could not only coexist, but could enhance each other. Whatever happens tomorrow, I said, pulling her closer on my couch, I want you to know that these last 3 months have been the best of my life. Even with all the incense and crystal nonsense, she teased, especially because of the incense and crystal nonsense. I kissed her forehead. You made me remember who I used to be before I learned to be afraid of taking up space. And you taught me that intuition is stronger when it's grounded in knowledge, she replied. We make a good team, Dr. Morrison. We make an excellent team. Future tech entrepreneur Chen. The morning of the pitch competition, I woke up before dawn with my heart hammering and my mouth dry. Avery was still asleep beside me, her purple hair spread across my pillows like spilled paint, and I took a moment to just watch her breathe and remind myself why we were doing this. Not for the money, though that would be life-changing. Not for the recognition, though that would be validating. We were doing this because Heal Hugh could help people who fell through the cracks of traditional healthcare, people who needed more than just symptom management, who deserved to be treated as whole human beings rather than collections of diagnoses. You're thinking so loud you woke me up, Avery mumbled, her eyes still closed. Sorry, nervous. She rolled over to face me, her eyes opening to reveal gold-flecked brown irises that had become my favorite sight in the world. Want to know a secret? She said, propping herself up on one elbow. Always. I pulled a card for us this morning. I'd grown accustomed to her tarot practice over the past few weeks, even finding myself curious about what insights her cards might offer. What did it say? She reached into her knitstand drawer and pulled out a card, placing it on the space between us on the mattress, the lovers. Partnership, harmony, perfect union, she said softly, but also choice. Choosing love over fear. Choosing to trust in something bigger than yourself. Looking at the card, 2 figures reaching toward each other under a bright sun, I felt something settle in my chest. Not certainty about the outcome, but certainty about us. Are you nervous? I asked. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. We're about to show the world something amazing. 3 hours later, we were standing in the wings of TechStart Academy's presentation hall, watching the first team deliver their pitch for a food delivery optimization app. The auditorium was packed with investors, industry leaders, and local media. And Brad, sitting in the front row like he owned the place. He looks exactly like I imagined, Avery whispered. Worse. Probably. He's got his concerned authority figure expression on. She squeezed my hand. Remember what we practiced. We know our stuff. We've tested every feature. We have data, projections, and a working prototype. And if all else fails, we tell them that healthcare needs more than just pills and procedures. We tell them that treating people like whole human beings isn't just good ethics, it's good business. When our names were called, we walked onto the stage with our laptops and the kind of confidence that comes from believing completely in what you're building. The stage lights were bright enough that I couldn't see individual faces in the audience, which was probably for the best. Good morning, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium sound system. I'm Rachel Morrison, and this is my partner, Avery Chen. We're here to introduce you to Heal Hue, a revolutionary platform that's going to change the way we think about healthcare. For the next 20 minutes, we delivered the presentation of our lives. We demonstrated our prototype, showed user testimonials from our beta testing, presented market research that supported the demand for integrative healthcare solutions. Avery's passion for holistic wellness combined seamlessly with my medical expertise, creating a picture of healthcare that was both scientifically rigorous and deeply human. During the Q&A section, the questions came fast and challenging. How do you ensure medical accuracy when incorporating non-traditional approaches? What's your user acquisition strategy in a market dominated by established healthcare apps? How do you plan to navigate regulatory requirements for medical advice platforms? We answered each question with confidence, our months of preparation evident in every response. I could see nods of approval from several panel members, genuine interest in their follow-up questions. Then Brad raised his hand. Dr. Morrison, he said, his voice carrying that familiar patronizing tone, I have to say, this is quite a departure from your previous work in pediatric surgery. Some might wonder if this represents a genuine career evolution or perhaps a reaction to recent personal circumstances. The auditorium went dead silent. Every eye in the room was on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to what was clearly a personal attack disguised as a professional question. I felt Avery tense beside me, but when I looked at her, she nodded slightly. Trust yourself. You're absolutely right, I said, my voice steady and clear. This is a complete departure from my previous work, because my previous work was about fixing what was broken. Heal Who is about preventing things from breaking in the first place. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, looking directly at Brad for the first time in months. You want to talk about personal circumstances? Fine, let's talk about that. Personal circumstances that led me here. I spent 10 years in a marriage where I was told I was too much and not enough at the same time. I spent those same 10 years working in a healthcare system that treats symptoms instead of people, that sees patients as diagnoses instead of human beings with complex needs. The auditorium was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Heal Hue exists because I learned that real healing requires seeing people completely. It requires treating not just their bodies, but their minds, their spirits, their whole lives. And it requires practitioners who understand that sometimes the most scientific thing you can do is acknowledge that science doesn't have all the answers yet. I paused, my eyes sweeping across the audience before returning to Brad. So yes, this is personal. Every meaningful innovation is personal. Every breakthrough comes from someone who is brave enough to admit that the way we've always done things isn't working for everyone. Brad's face had gone red, but before he could respond, Avery stepped forward. If I may add something, she said, her voice calm but carrying an authority that filled the room. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a single tarot card, placing it on the podium between us, the lovers. This card represents perfect union, not just between people, but between ideas that seem opposite but are actually complementary. Traditional medicine and holistic wellness, evidence-based practice and intuitive understanding, logic and creativity. She looked directly at the panel of investors, ignoring Brad entirely. Heal Hue works because it doesn't ask people to choose between different approaches to healing. It integrates them. And our success in beta testing proves that when you treat people as whole human beings instead of walking symptoms, everyone benefits: patients, practitioners, and yes, investors. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium, someone started clapping. Then another person joined in, and another, until the entire room was applauding. Except Brad, who was staring at us with an expression I couldn't quite read, but didn't particularly care to analyze. "Thank you," I said into the microphone as the applause died down. "We look forward to answering any additional questions." But there weren't any more questions. The panel was already huddled together, conferring in excited whispers. Backstage, I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. The adrenaline that had carried me through the presentation was wearing off, leaving me feeling exposed and raw. "That was incredible," Avery said, pulling me into her arms. "You were incredible. The way you handled him. I can't believe I said all that. In front of everyone. In front of cameras." I buried my face in her shoulder. What if we don't get funding? What if I just tanked our entire project to settle a personal score? Hey. She pulled back to look at me. "Look at me. You didn't settle anything. You told the truth about why this matters. You showed them that Heal Hugh isn't just an app, it's a mission." Before I could respond, Marcus appeared with a grin so wide it practically split his face in half. "Ladies," he said, "you might want to sit down for this." We didn't get it, did we? I felt my heart sink. The personal drama was too much. "You got it," he interrupted. $2 million in seed funding, plus 3 of the investors. Want to schedule follow-up meetings about Series A potential. The world seemed to tilt sideways. $2 million. $2 million for our app, our vision, our proof that different approaches to healing could work together. "Are you serious?" Avery whispered. "Dead serious?" The panel said they've never seen a more compelling combination of market need, technical innovation, and passionate founders. Oh, and Dr. Morrison. Dr. Bradley Morrison specifically requested that I tell you he won't be participating in the funding consortium. I felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep in my chest. "He's removing himself?" "Conflict of interest," he said. "Though between you and me, I think you made him realize he was on the wrong side of history." After Marcus left to handle the paperwork, Avery and I found ourselves alone in the empty presentation hall. The stage lights were off, the audience was gone, but I could still feel the energy of what had just happened. "We did it," I said, still not quite believing it. "We did it?" She spun me around, both of us laughing with the kind of joy that comes from achieving something you weren't sure was possible. When she set me down, her expression grew serious. "Rachel, there's something I need to tell you." My stomach dropped. After everything that had just happened, after the success and the vindication and the promise of a future we'd built together, she was going to tell me something that would change everything. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I love you," she said simply. "Not just love, I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably, in a way that's probably going to mess with my psychic abilities and definitely goes against everything my mentor warned me about." Relief flooded through me so fast I felt dizzy. "That's what you needed to tell me? That you love me? That I love you and I want to build this life with you?" "The business, yes, but also everything else. I want to wake up next to you and fight about code architecture and burn incense, while you organize our files alphabetically and drive each other crazy in the best possible way." I kissed her then, right there on the empty stage where we just convinced a room full of strangers to believe in our impossible dream. "I love you too," I said against her lips. "Even though you're probably going to fill our office with crystals and I'm probably going to color code everything you own." "Especially because of that," she corrected. "We balance each other out." As we walked out of the auditorium hand in hand, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass doors. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, confident, radiant, unafraid to take up space. She looked like someone who'd figured out how to debug her own heartache. It was a Tuesday evening in March when Avery suggested we take a walk along the waterfront. I'd been buried in quarterly reports all day, trying to make sense of user engagement metrics and revenue projections, when she appeared in my office with 2 cups of coffee and that expression that meant she had something important to say. "Come on," she said. "The reports will still be there in an hour, but the sunset won't." She was right, of course. One of the things I'd learned about building a company with someone you love is that it's easy to forget to actually spend time together when you're both so focused on creating something meaningful. We'd instituted weekly date nights, no-tech dinners, and weekend mornings that were just for us. But sometimes we still needed reminders to look up from our screens and remember why we were doing all of this. The waterfront was busy with evening joggers and couples walking dogs, but Avery led us to a quieter section of the pier where we could look out at the city skyline reflected in the water. "Beautiful night," I said, leaning against the railing beside her. "Perfect night," she agreed, but there was something in her voice that made me look at her more carefully. She seemed nervous, which was unusual for Avery. Even in our most stressful business moments, investor presentations, product launches, difficult hiring decisions, she maintained a calm confidence that I'd come to rely on. "Everything okay?" I asked. "More than okay." She turned to face me fully, her hands reaching for mine. "Rachel, these last 80 months with you have been the most incredible of my life." "Mine too," I said, wondering where this was going. "When I told Brad that you were mine that day at the boot camp, I was lying. Not because I didn't want it to be true, but because it seemed impossible. You were this brilliant, accomplished surgeon who was way out of my league, and I was just some girl with purple hair and too many crystals." "Avery, let me finish," she said, squeezing my hands. "What I didn't expect was that you'd see something in me worth building a life around. Not just a business partnership, but a real partnership. The kind where we challenge each other and support each other and create something together that neither of us could have created alone." The nervous energy I'd been sensing from her was starting to make sense, and my heart began beating faster. "You taught me that intuition is stronger when it's grounded in knowledge," she continued. "And I hope I taught you that knowledge is richer when it's balanced with trust in yourself and what you feel as well as what you know." She let go of my hands and reached into her jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made my breath catch in my throat. "Rachel Morrison," she said, dropping to one knee right there on the pier as evening joggers slowed to watch and a few people pulled out their phones to record what was clearly about to be a proposal. "Will you marry me?" She opened the box too, revealed the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen, not a traditional diamond solitaire, but a vintage Art Deco piece with a deep blue sapphire, surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light from the sunset and the city skyline. "It's sapphire for wisdom and loyalty," she said, looking up at me with eyes that held everything we'd built together and everything we hoped to build in the future. And the setting is from the 1920s because I wanted something that represented timeless love, but also innovation, tradition, but also the courage to do things differently. I stared down at her, this woman who had changed everything about my life simply by seeing me clearly and loving what she saw. This woman who had taught me that the most logical thing I could do was trust my heart. "Yes," I said, the word coming out as barely more than a whisper. "Yes, yes," I said louder, laughing through tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Of course, yes. Of course I'll marry you." The small crowd that had gathered erupted in cheers as she slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit because Of course, Avery had somehow figured out my ring size without me noticing and stood up to kiss me with the kind of joy that made everything else fade away. When we finally broke apart, she was grinning so wide I could see all her teeth. "I love you, future wife," she said. "I love you too, future wife," I replied, admiring the way the ring looked on my hand. Though I should probably warn you that I'm going to want to plan this wedding with spreadsheets and color-coded timelines. And I should probably warn you that I'm going to want to incorporate some non-traditional elements. Maybe a hand fasting ceremony, definitely some crystal blessing ritual, possibly sage burning if the venue allows it. "Perfect," I said, kissing her again. "We'll have the most beautifully organized mystical wedding in history." As we walked home hand in hand, my new engagement ring catching streetlights and car headlights and the glow from restaurant windows, I thought about how impossible this all would have seemed just 2 years ago. How the woman I'd been married to Brad, defined by others' expectations, afraid to take up space, could never have imagined the woman I'd become. Avery? Yeah. "Do you think your card saw this coming? Back at the beginning?" She was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness she brought to all discussions of her intuitive practices. "I think the card saw possibilities," she said finally, "but I think we made the choices that turned those possibilities into reality. Together, together," she agreed. "The best kind of magic." The afternoon sun streams through the floor to ceiling, windows of Hugh's new headquarters, illuminating the organized chaos of a successful tech startup in full swing. Our team has grown to 35 people, our user base has topped 500,000, and we've just announced partnerships with 5 major hospital systems across the country. I'm in my office reviewing our quarterly impact report patient satisfaction scores, treatment compliance rates, cost savings date, when my phone buzzes with a text from Avery. "Conference room, 5 minutes, bring tissues." She's probably arranged another celebration for some milestone I've forgotten about. Or maybe she wants to show me the latest user testimonials. My wife has a talent for marking moments I might otherwise let pass unremarked. My wife, even after 6 months of marriage, the word still gives me a little thrill. I make my way to our main conference room, where I find our entire team gathered around the big screen. Everyone wearing the kind of barely contained excitement that usually means very good news. "What's going on?" I ask. "See for yourself," Avery says, gesturing toward the screen where she's pulled up what appears to be a news article. Time magazine names Hugh one of the top 10 healthcare innovations of the year. I read aloud. The room erupts in cheers and applause, but I'm still reading, trying to process what this means. "In just 2 years, Hugh has fundamentally changed how we think about patient care," continues the article, "by seamlessly integrating traditional medical approaches with evidence-based complementary treatments. Founders Rachel Morrison and Avery Chun have created a platform that treats patients as whole human beings rather than collections of symptoms. The results speak for themselves: 94% patient satisfaction rates, 73% improvement in treatment compliance, and measurable improvements in overall health outcomes across their entire user base." I look up at Avery, who is watching me with that expression of pride and love and barely contained excitement that I've learned means she's about to say something that will probably make me cry. "There's more," she says, clicking to the next page. They interviewed users again. The article includes testimonials from people whose lives have been changed by what we built. A veteran whose PTSD improved when his treatment plan addressed both his trauma and his chronic pain. A woman whose autoimmune condition became manageable when she found approaches that addressed her stress levels alongside her medication. A teenager whose anxiety and depression responded to a combination of therapy, medication, and mindfulness practices that work together instead of competing with each other. Listen to this one, says Mike, our lead developer, reading from his own phone. He'll save my marriage. I've been to 12 different specialists for my chronic fatigue, and everyone wanted to treat one piece of me without looking at the whole picture. Hugh helped me understand that my sleep problems, my digestive issues, and my depression were all connected. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again. I have to sit down because I'm definitely going to cry, and I'd rather not do it standing up in front of my entire team. We did this, I say, looking around at the faces of the people who helped us turn an impossible dream into reality. All of us, we actually changed how healthcare works. You did this, corrects Sarah, our head of user experience. You two had the vision. The rest of us just helped make it real. After the impromptu celebration winds down and everyone returns to their work, Avery and I find ourselves alone in the conference room with the Time article still glowing on the screen. So, she says, settling into the chair beside me, how does it feel to be officially recognized as someone who revolutionized healthcare? Surreal, I admit. 2 years ago, I was convinced my life was over. Divorced, career changing, starting over at 32 with no idea what I was doing. And now I'm married to my best friend, running a company that actually helps people, and apparently getting written about in Time magazine. I shake my head. How is this my life? This is your life because you were brave enough to debug everything that wasn't working and write new code from scratch. She takes my hand, her thumb running over my wedding ring, a simple band that complements my engagement ring perfectly. You were brave enough to trust that there was a different way to live. We were brave enough, I correct her. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. You're brilliant and determined and capable of anything you set your mind to. She grins, but I'm glad you didn't have to. As we sit in our conference room, surrounded by the evidence of everything we've built together, I think about that scared, angry woman who walked into a coding boot camp 18 months ago. She was so convinced that her life was ending when really it was just beginning. Avery? Yeah? I know this is going to sound completely unscientific and probably a little mystical for a former surgeon to admit ... My favorite kind of admission from you. I think the universe knew what it was doing when it made you my coding partner that first day. She's quiet for a moment, and when I look at her, she has that expression she gets when she's accessing some intuitive knowledge I can't quite reach. Want to know something? She says finally, always. I pulled a card that morning. Before class, before I knew who my partner would be. She reaches into her purse and produces a well-worn tarot card, placing it on the conference table between us, the lovers. The same card she'd shown me the morning of our pitch competition. The same card she'd placed on the podium when we won our funding. I've been carrying it ever since, she admits, because sometimes the best magic isn't about predicting the future. It's about recognizing the present moment when everything you've been waiting for finally arrives. I pick up the card, studying. The image of two figures reaching toward each other under a bright sun. Partnership, harmony, perfect union. Choosing love over fear. So you knew, I say. From the very beginning, you knew. I knew there was potential for something extraordinary. She leans over to kiss my cheek. But we had to choose to make it real. Every day, in 100 small ways, we had to keep choosing each other. And we did. And we did. She agrees. And we will. As we gather our things to head home to the house we bought together, with its perfect blend of my organizational systems and her mystical decorations, I catch sight of our reflection in the conference room's glass wall. Two women who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful together. A love story and a success story, and a testament to what happens when you're brave enough to debug your own life. Ready to go home life? Avery asks, holding out her hand. Ready, I say, taking her hand and following her toward the elevator. Though I should probably warn you that I'm going to want to create a spreadsheet to track all our media mentions. And I should probably warn you that I'm going to want to do a gratitude ritual to honor how far we've come. Perfect, I say, as the elevator doors close around us. We'll have the most beautifully organized mystical celebration of success in history. Some love stories begin with grand gestures or love at first sight. Mine began with a coding assignment and the slow revelation that the person I was meant to build a life with had been sitting right beside me all along, debugging code and burning incense and seeing possibilities where I could only see problems. But the best part? Our story is just beginning. Because when you find someone who sees all your code, the elegant functions and the messy patches, the brilliant algorithms and the embarrassing bugs, and loves the entire program anyway, every day becomes a chance to write something new together. Every day becomes a chance to choose love over fear, partnership over independence. The beautiful uncertainty of building something together over the safety of going it alone. And if that's not magic, I don't know what is.